Hi, welcome to BA Brew. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Sarah.
I'm Kerry.
So today we're going to be speaking about business analysis skills and how to develop them. And we're going to start the conversation. Sarah, I'm going to come to you, and Kerry, you're going to get some thinking time on this. Sarah, what would you say would be the key or the core business analyst skills?
Thanks, Jonathan. So for me, I like to think of the skills in three categories. The first one being personal, those softer skills, not necessarily specific to business analysis, but that help you work with others. So one of the ones for me that I found is probably the most important is communication, because it encompasses so many of the other skills in that category. So such as, building good relationships, really taking interest in talking to your customers, getting to know them. You might have shared interests such as like running, or you may have worked in the same department. It's just really nice to kind of get to understand them, be able to listen to them, understand their needs, play back their kind of understanding, build empathy as well. So, actually some people have a lot of challenges. They may have this might be the second time they're trying to get their project through. So it's just taking time to kind of understand that, and that will probably build trust with them, so they're likely to open up a bit more as well in that field. Couple of other ones as well, actually, in personal for me is organisation. So one thing I find is being really organised and kind of meeting the commitments that you set as well. So people have trust in you. If you say you're going to deliver something by a certain date, that you deliver that, they get to kind of expect that you will deliver on time, or especially kind of renegotiate those commitments if you can't as well.
It helps with credibility, doesn't it? If you're organised and you do what you say you're going to do, then that gives a basis for building trust with them, doesn't it? But I think listening, and you mentioned listening there, Sarah, like I've met with people that call themselves BAs that are really terrible listeners, and I don't get it. I think it's a really core skill, and if we're going to understand people's perspectives and work with them to explore their needs, listening and organisation and the other ones that you mentioned are really absolutely key. I'm sensing there was a part B to that answer.
So I guess kind of the second one is obviously talking about kind of business skills. So just having an understanding of the business area that you work in, the company as a whole. So understanding the organisation structure, the terminology. I think we've all come across acronyms before that we don't really understand. So it's just taking the time. I think as a BA, you can always ask those questions that some people don't want to ask. It's kind of like, what does that acronym stand for? What are we talking about? Whereas some people kind of assume everyone else knows it and don't want to kind of ask that question. So that's quite nice. And I think that helps as well, kind of coming back to the personal skills, the communication. It helps you build those core relationships within the business. And then, the third one for me is those professional skills, the techniques that we need to be able to do our job well, which AssistKD offer the great diploma and the advanced diploma, which would help you get best practice techniques that you can go and apply in your organisation, which is good as well.
Thank you for that, and we accept the compliment. So thank you. The factory of producing new acronyms and TLAs, so 3-letter acronyms and 4-letter acronyms and code words, and I just remember my first days working as a business analyst, and I think I spent the first month writing down, I kept a log of all the different terms and acronyms that I came across, and I went into work in an insurance company, and it was just a different language. And what it is, I wrote them down in the meeting, and I would sit with my mentor or my line manager at the end of the meeting, or whenever I could get some time with them, and I'd ask them, what does this word mean? And sometimes when I got a bit more confident, I was asking in the meeting, can you explain that? But certainly for the first month or so, it's just a completely different language. Kerry, which of the, do you agree with Sarah's view around these three areas of skill? And if so, which do you think is the most important?
Yes, I do. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That was a really good list. And communication was definitely one on my list as a strong BA skill. And like you said, it actually feeds into a lot of the other soft skills that BAs need for their role. So another one that I had listed in relation to that was relationship building. because as well as being able to talk to different users, so whether that's a business lead or whether it's a technical team or a subject matter expert, it's having the different types of language to be able to speak to them and then be able to interpret what they're saying and then be able to put it into business analysis documentation for other people to read.
It's interesting because when you're just speaking there, Kerry, I was thinking about, when they're talking and you're trying to understand their perspective and their language, but thinking, I'm not sure where that goes in the business analysis skill framework. Maybe it's an interpersonal skill, but that analytical, problem-solving, inquisitive mindset, but then being able to join the dots between what someone said over here on the left and that means that, and that these bits of information are related or not related to each other. It's a really difficult skill to develop, and quite an interesting one as well.
I think that, sorry, Jonathan, I think that comes back to what you were just saying about listening as well, listening to what people are saying and actually writing down what they're saying, as well as trying to interpret it for other users or business users or who you're dealing with on your projects.
Yeah. I'm going to pose a different question now, and it's going to go to you, Kerry. So, Sarah, you get some thinking time on this one. What skills do you think we need for the future? What are the new skills that we need to be looking at developing so we can improve the standing of each of us as individuals and the profession as a whole in terms of our effectiveness? Any thoughts on that, Kerry?
So I think for me, one of the areas is having a business architecture function. I've worked in a couple of large financial institutions where I've worked on a project. So take one of my examples of onboarding. I've worked on a project in one product area to look at the onboarding process and go through what that means for the company and the organisation and what key fields and data we need to capture from customers and what their customer experience is. And then I've worked then on another project in another product area that's looking at exactly the same thing, and you're starting the project all over again, and I just feel like you're going round and round in the same circle. Whereas if you have like an architecture across the business that looks at all the projects that are going on across product lines, I think that's really important, and then businesses can invest their money in the right places without overlapping of project work. So that is one key area. And then another key area, I think, for me personally, which I love, is customer experience and design thinking. It's stepping into the customer's shoes, which is sometimes as BAs we forget to do because you're so involved in talking to business users, trying to understand the internal business processes. Sometimes the customer gets forgotten about. So you have, let's put a chair in front of you, sit the customer on it every meeting that you have. And whilst you're talking to a business user, thinking about what's the customer's view as well. So really bringing in some of the design thinking, customer experience skill sets, things like personas, customer journey mapping, just to really bring the customer into all the projects that we deal with.
Yeah. So I really like both of the parts of what you said there. So they're taking that holistic view, looking at the capabilities in the organisation across the different products and services. I think most BAs would agree. Taking the holistic view is really important. But I think you're talking about it being across the entire enterprise, and that we do it as a matter of course, that we're thinking, right, have we already done that? Have we already got a process that does, for example, onboarding or some sort of security check or something which it's common across the products or services? And that for me is helping us to help our organizations to be more efficient and more effective for business kind of reasons, but that links directly to the customer experience for me. Because if you've got two products for the organization and you've got two different ways of setting up those products, and it feels a bit clunky or very different, or you're being asked to repeat the same data, provide the same information, it just feels a bit clunky. And lean is the thing I wanted to throw in. I love lean, and I think that kind of thinking about quality and the customer and flow, we've got to do this as a matter of course. A design think is a brilliant toolkit there as well, for the BA to pick up and consider using. And some of the tools you mentioned there, the empathy map and customer journey map, and there's things like feedback capture grids and prototyping and all of these skills. We've got to, all these techniques, we've got to be confident in pulling them out of our toolkit and using them to help our businesses move forward. Sarah, anything you'd like to add in terms of skills that we need for the future?
Yeah, I was just going to go off the back of the architecture one, because I think that's so important, because you can get kind of business areas working in silos sometimes. So they might have kind of the same need across different departments, and you end up with like different solutions trying to meet the same need. And actually, if you can kind of get something that can meet multiple purposes, you're obviously saving time and money there as well. So sometimes you've got multiple departments working on different spreadsheets, or someone's got a system, and it's great if you can kind of have that architecture function that looks across the board, so we can actually kind of identify, where we may have gaps and get that kind of solution, which is good.
It's interesting you say the word need there. I'm immediately thinking about requirements, so statement of want or need, and we've got these requirements, these needs that are at a business level, a business or organisation level. So we need to onboard customers as an example, and it's kind of bringing the requirements engineering approach that we've got up a level, so beyond the silo or the project or the individual product that we're working on. I'm thinking across the products, across the projects, across the business, and it's kind of building our confidence and ability to think and act holistically, but whilst also thinking about how do we take those high level concepts down into the detail and linking the elements. And that's where communication comes in, because we've got to get better at communicating and sharing knowledge amongst our fellow business analysts and change professionals. So we've got to work more closely with people like change managers, business architects, enterprise architects, data architects, and others. We've got to get much better at capturing and harnessing and using knowledge. Is one of the things I'm thinking about in terms of what we need in terms of skills for the future.
Bringing people together is a quite nice way to do that, where you can kind of even, to like watch these podcasts, for example, you may kind of learn something from one of these podcasts where other people have got experience from different projects or, assignments that they've worked on. It's nice to kind of share those lessons back, so other people don't kind of have the same issues.
Yeah. As you're speaking, I'm thinking, well, should mentoring and coaching be part of the skills that we need to develop so we can help to pass on that knowledge? And the other thing I'm going to throw in, sales. I think we've got to get better at selling ourselves. We'll be more confident at selling what we can do to help our businesses. What do you think, Kerry?
So as soon as you said sales, I was almost like, that's where service design, so coming back to the future, service design would really help, because you're selling services to people, and if people can be clear on what you're offering as a BA function within your company, they know the services that you've got, then they might help to understand what we as BAs do, which is a lot of questions that we get. What do you do as a BA?
Yeah.
So if you can have a list of services of what we cover, I think that would really help.
And the value offer of each of those services, so we're very clear on what we do and what we don't do. Because I think assertiveness, sometimes saying no, we can't do that. That's not in my remit, or it's outside of my skill set potentially. But I'm going to try a different take. How do you develop your skills? How do you go about developing a skill? So let's say you recognise you need to develop a skill that perhaps you don't have. What are your steps? How have you done it in the past? How's it work for you? And I'm going to go to Sarah for this one, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So for me, I kind of like to think about all the kind of skills, I guess, if I think about where I am in my career and then where I want to get to. So one of the things that's helped me actually is the career planning tool on AssistKD's website, because it helps you spot any gaps that you might have not necessarily thought about. So it's a nice way to identify some of the skills that you perhaps need to kind of move on to that kind of next role. And then what I tend to do is then have a look in adding those to kind of some kind of skills matrix to kind of think about actually where I am with those skills. Do I feel like I've had enough practice in them? Am I kind of, you know, an expert in them, or, you know, is it more of a basic level? And then that helps me think about for the year ahead which ones I want to focus on, and I can move them then into some sort of like personal development plan with a clear goal and, you know, ways to kind of, you know, improve that skill, whether it's, you know, a training course, or whether I, you know, need to kind of get some practice in using it. So I know at the start of my career, one of the things that I wanted to get more experienced in was talking in front of people, like doing presentations. So I literally would volunteer for every opportunity to present something, whether it was like a charity event that I was running at SSE when I was working there, or, you know, whether it was you know, a project that I wanted to give an update on. But, you know, the more I did it, the more confidence I had in kind of doing that. So sometimes it's just about kind of overcoming your fear and practicing on some of those kind of things. But also having a role model, I find, is really useful. So someone that you can shadow, or, you know, peer review your work, just so sometimes there's questions that maybe you haven't thought about to ask. So, and I also kept a learning journal, which I felt was quite useful. So every time I used a new technique, or I facilitated a workshop, I would just spend some minutes after it thinking, how did I feel it went? Is there anything that went really well? Anything that I felt didn't go so well? You know, would I do anything differently next time? So when I would approach my next technique or kind of workshop that I'm going into, you know, I potentially change depending on, you know, what I'd written in my journal. It's quite a nice way to self-reflect.
Yeah,
on where you want to get to.
That power of reflection and feedback, really key for me in my own journey in terms of developing skills, particularly presentation skills. Actually, I once went on a training course where they videoed me at the start of the week presenting, and then I did the course, and then they videoed me at the end, and so practicing feedback and using a framework if you need to, but getting advice from people that you trust as well. I really struggled with presenting, Sarah, as a skill early in my career, and a bit like you, I volunteered every single time to present because I knew that it would help me to get better and more confident. And it's I'm reading a book at the moment called Mindset by Carol Dweck. You can have a look at it. I think I've pronounced her name correctly, but it's all about thinking about your skills and thinking, well, I can grow and learn your skills, and you can help yourself to become better at things. And if you start with that as a mindset when you're trying to adopt a new skill, you're not going to be perfect first time that you do something. First workshop you run, certainly not going to be perfect. I remember being really nervous about running my first workshop. And I'm still not perfect now, definitely not. But keeping an eye on it and practicing it and working with it, I think it's really, really helpful. Kerry, can you remember being nervous running your first workshop, or were you not nervous? I don't know.
Oh, very, very nervous, I would think. Yeah, the thought of standing up in front of people and running a workshop, I think everybody has that fear of and the anxiety of standing up, especially in your first one, when you don't really know what to expect, and if you don't know the stakeholders very well, you don't know how everybody's going to react in the room. I think, yes, very nervous is what I would say.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's dealing with the equipment as well. It's making sure you've got enough time to. I remember you know, not so much now, but when you used to have a projector to kind of set up, and, you know, you always wanted to allow yourself time that everything would work, or, you know, how you deal with someone's mobile phone going off midway through and not getting kind of caught up in that. Those kind of things that, like, you, with experience, you learn how to deal with them, don't you?
Yeah, you do, and you learn how to deal with those kind of mishaps, I suppose, that happen by the experience of having dealt with them. But I find reading can be quite helpful in terms of development skill. But the other thing I quite like is just chatting something through with someone. Someone that I trust. It could be someone at work or someone else I work. If I've got a particular challenge or I'm trying to work on something that I want to get better at, just chatting it through and looking for different opinions and seeing there's some different perspectives. Podcasts, YouTube videos are obviously useful for introductions and analysis of your skills. I spent way too long. I did a thesis on skill frameworks, where I compared the Sophia framework, which is the skills framework for the information age, and also the IIBA competency framework. And this was a previous version of it. But there are published career frameworks that you can look at and measure yourself against. And I'd suggest that there's some resources out there that you can tap into if you are looking for kind of a broad set of skills and comparison. So I've just got one other thing that I wanted us to see if we could cover if we've got time, and it's the transferability of skills into other roles. And Kerry, you mentioned business architecture, and I know that you've worked as a business architect. Did you find that the business analysis skills helped you when you were performing business architecture?
Massively. It's the same sort of soft skills. You need communication, you need to be able to talk to people. As a business architect, you also need to be able to talk probably more to like senior leadership team, so more to the senior leaders. So just knowing who they are, what they do, and how to talk to them in a different way as you would probably to somebody technical, like speaking in sort of business language. So definitely helps. It is pretty much the same skill set. It's just almost like taken up a level to more of the senior leadership. So it's just talking to different people. But still, you've still got to be clear on what you're saying. You've got to make sure people are understanding what you say and they're listening to what you're saying, so they take on board everything that you do, you say, and mean. So,
And Sarah, I think you've just recently started a new role, have you?
I have, in software asset management. So what's nice is that the skills are quite transferable into the role from a business analyst. So using a lot of kind of the personal skills, again, like communication, there'll be a lot of kind of business and project consultation in my new role. So understanding the user's needs around software, but also a great opportunity to use one of those professional skills around Lean and Six Sigma that we've kind of touched on, to kind of look at, you know, where we are at the moment in terms of our processes and, you know, compliance, and looking at kind of where we can kind of smooth out the process, eliminate the waste, any defects or things slowing us down, making sure we've got all our processes documented. So we're obviously be able to run as efficient as we can, and ideally having a really effective cost model as well. So once we know what licenses and things like that we need, we can then purchase them and make sure we get the ones that we actually need, rather than, you know, having to spend money on things we don't need. So
I think this first time we haven't mentioned it as a skill, but being financial literacy is one of those business domain skills, and I think we've got to practice understanding costs and benefits and impacts, and not be afraid to look at a profit and loss account maybe, or to look at a balance sheet kind of statement, and trying to understand what that means for the organization. And it requires that confidence that you can go and learn those things, so that you can then help understand that language of the business in terms of finance. So just one last thing then. Anything that you wanted to add on this podcast that we haven't said, Kerry? Any last final thoughts on skill or skill development?
Just one more thing from me. I assume it's a part of skill development, is I've also done quite a few sort of personality type reviews. So when you're talking to different people, you can kind of understand how their behaviour, sort of how they work, and how they sort of behave. For example, you know, there's Belbin role profiles. I've also done DISC, which is a behavioural driven one, which just shows you who you are as a personality, how you work. So if you're clashing with somebody sort of personality wise, by doing these sort of personality questionnaires, I think you can kind of, if you know like the different personality types, you can kind of classify that person. So it helps you kind of work better with them if you know how they work best and what their behaviours are.
I really like Belbin, but the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI one as well, I've used in the past. Was just the other day I was looking at the Star Wars character version of that, and it had me coming out as I think Emperor Palpatine, which I'm not sure is very good. You can also, I think there's a Simpsons version of it as well, which is quite interesting. But there's some really good tools for self kind of reflection and analysis. So brilliant. And then Sarah, anything that you wanted to add? The final thoughts on BA skill development.
Yeah, I was just going to say feedback's probably a good one as well. So, actually when you've come to the end of a project or you're coming up kind of your 6-month or appraisal, it's nice to kind of reach out to kind of people that you've worked with just to get some feedback on what's gone well, maybe areas for improvement. And actually as their kind of manager previously, it was quite nice to kind of see if there's any common themes across kind of the team. Just, is there any areas for like improvement or extra training that we could do as a group? So I find feedback quite valuable.
Brilliant. And you've also mentioned leadership there, which we hadn't mentioned again, as there's so many of these skills, but yeah, brilliant. So I just want to say thank you for joining us, Sarah, Kerry. Thanks for watching, listening. If you've got any ideas for future topics that you'd like us to discuss on The Brew, please email us at babrew@assistkd.com. Thank you.